right, on. Good morning. I am so excited to be up here for the closing panel and probably like many of you, grateful to SCORE for bringing together such bright minds on such an important, timely topic. I was taking lots of notes. I hope many of you were too, and excited to go back and talk with many of you about the implications for our conversations today. We are running a little short on time, so I'm going to be very brief with my opening comments, but I did want to, again, say thank you to SCORE and build on something that Emily said. I'll give you a fun fact before we start. She mentioned that she had her wedding reception here, which I think was 12 years ago in this room. She and I have been friends and colleagues for a long time, and what she didn't say is that I actually met my husband that same night in this room, and we're celebrating 10 years this fall. So this is a special place, to say the least, and I'm grateful to Emily and to SCORE for bringing us back in this beautiful building. With that, let's get down to the business. And I am lucky to have 4 really all-star education leaders from Tennessee with me today on this panel. I'm eager for you to hear from them, to learn with them about all the work that they are leading and learning in the space of AI. So as we start, please go around and we'll start with Amanda and work down this way. Introduce yourself, tell us your role in your organization that you represent, and give us one example of something in the AI space that you're excited about, that you're leaning into, and that you think will have an impact on student learning. Absolutely.
Hi, I'm Amanda Glover. I'm the Director of AI Initiatives at SCORE. And so part of my role that I'm so privileged to do is I get to connect learnings that we are learning all of the time from in-state leaders here in Tennessee and then also from across the country. And part of my role at SCORE is connecting those learnings back to our organizational priorities, our existing North Stars, if you will, on how AI can accelerate our current priorities for better teaching and learning, how AI might present opportunities to innovate education, and then of course, as has been mentioned many times already today, how AI can help ensure that our students are prepared for the future world that they will enter into after K-12 education. So it's been really great to do that. And I think something that we're really excited about at SCORE is learning even more around what are the enabling conditions that we have seen so far. And while the evidence may be thin and pilots are just starting to get ramped up here in Tennessee, we are learning more and more every day about what are the enabling conditions that lead to successful implementation of AI, what leads to student outcomes, and what are the use cases that span beyond just student-facing AI. There's teacher-facing AI, there's operational use cases that are going to make a huge difference for education systems. And something recently that SCORE launched, which many in this room know about, is our AI Innovation Fund. And I think that is one of the examples in which we are hoping to invest in ideas that are going to help us learn more about these enabling conditions and creating this ecosystem of learning here in Tennessee. So through these different creative ideas and proposals that were brought forth, we're learning what is top of mind for Tennessee educators and educator leaders, what problems of practice they've identified, which we've learned is a smart starting point for even evaluating AI's use and helpfulness in reaching existing instructional priorities. And then we're hoping to share those learnings out with the field. So creating this ecosystem for learning here in Tennessee around AI pilots and then sharing those learnings throughout is something that we're hoping to do.
Well, good morning. My name is Blake Freeman. I'm the Chief Academic Officer for Hamilton County Schools down in Chattanooga, Tennessee. A little unique in that I am a product of the school district that I get to serve. And I've worked there my entire career. And so while some of you have been talking about vast things that are happening across the country, I get the privilege actually of looking at a small scale, our town, and seeing how we might be impactful. I get the opportunity to serve 44,000 students and over 3,000 teachers. And I think what excites me is the balanced approach we're trying to take. I've learned so much already this morning. A lot of it has been honestly affirming, but really the balanced approach to understand the importance of AI and how we have to prepare our students as they're graduating and moving on into their post-secondary lives. But at the same time, having a respect for the human connection and interaction that it has to happen to be able to help students move. I was excited to hear, of course, Mojo talk earlier. That's one thing that our logo of Hamilton County Schools is up there earlier because we are trying to tackle middle school literacy and have seen some success with that connected with our high quality instructional materials. So excited to be here this morning.
Awesome, thank you. I'm Daren Dickson, and I am the Executive Director of Innovation at Valor Collegiate, which is a small charter network here in Nashville. We have 2 middle schools and a high school. And I moved into this innovation role last year. I was our Chief Culture Officer for many years and a founder. And was really, I have a child and family therapy background, so I'm a therapist by trade. And so, but now I'm in charge of our AI initiative. So it's just been an interesting blend of really attending to the impacts on holistic development. One of the things we did last year and then doing again this year is launch an AI community council. So it was cool to hear that spoken about by Amanda, the importance of that, because our community, like I'm guessing all the communities here are pretty split, and there's just a lot of complicating factors in terms of how people feel about the arrival of AI. And so having students and families and teachers and leaders all grappling together, and we kind of developed our policy and our norms around AI use together. So that's one of the things I was going to point out.
That's cool. Hi, everyone. I'm Sara Robinson-Chin. I am currently a member of the Ingram group, which is a consulting group based here in Nashville. Before this, I've spent my entire career in public education. I started my career actually teaching in Memphis. I was a Teach for America teacher in Memphis City Schools, and then have spent the last several years in school district governance. Most recently as Chief Strategy Officer at Metro Nashville Public Schools for the last 4 years. And before that as the Deputy Chief of Staff at Indianapolis Public Schools. So I've been lucky enough to sort of come of age in public education in this moment, especially post-COVID and the one-to-one movement, and really seeing how that is now evolving into this next phase of the way that we run and think about our schools through the lens of preparing for AI. I have a lot of stuff I'm excited to talk about today. I'm a bit of a techno-optimist, which will help provide some balance on this panel from knowing some of the folks up here pretty well. But something that I am weirdly optimistic about is the return of the liberal arts, which I know is not supported by any of the data on where funding is going. But I am very excited about, I personally was a liberal arts major. I studied history and English in undergrad. And something I'm very excited about in this moment is really going back to these ideas of synthesizing arguments, understanding texts, grappling with ideas, testing ideas in conversation with each other as being essential skills in the AI era when information is being produced at just unprecedented rates, and how we are equipping our students to think through and engage and synthesize ideas that come out of texts. It's something that I'm just very excited about and hope to see become foundational to the ways that we are operating our schools.
Great. Thank you all for those opening comments. And Sara, I'll say take a breath because I'm coming to you next and we'll work our way down here. So Sara, in your leadership at Metro Nashville Public Schools, where I have 2 children enrolled, so thank you for your service at the district level, you were responsible for the launch of some AI pilot programs at a time when, as we heard earlier, you're being inundated with offers from ed tech vendors promising all kinds of outcomes. We're also at a time nationally, at state level, district level, of necessarily re-examining the role of technology in our classrooms. How is Metro Nashville determining which AI solutions deserve attention? And what questions do you think district leaders need to be wrestling with to make good decisions when launching a pilot?
Yeah. So the first part of my answer, I feel like Scott Langford should just come up here and give my pitch for me because you did it perfectly in a slide earlier, which was Dr. Langford is the superintendent of schools at Sumner County. Just starting from the place of saying, you have to start by talking about what is your strategy for teaching and learning, and then back into what that means for AI from there. So something that we were very committed to at MNPS in this work, and I led the strategy department, was just starting from a place of saying, okay, as we think about an AI future, what needs to be true for our students? What do they need to be able to do? What proficiencies and competencies do they need to have when they graduate from high school? What are the systems, routines, and procedures that are going to be necessary through that K-12 continuum to get them there? And then what does that mean for us as leaders for how we use AI to supplement and accelerate that work? And then where are there places where it doesn't make sense to use AI to supplement that work? So within my department, we settled on really 3 big buckets of work that we thought was essential to that vision. The first thing was from more looking through the experience of students themselves, like what are students doing when they are engaging with AI as we think about their learning trajectories. The second being thinking about how we support our teachers to leverage and use AI as we're pursuing our outcome goals for students. And then the third was thinking more at the district level for how do we operate and organize our time so that we are maximizing human capacity for human essential tasks and minimizing the time that we are spending on activities that don't require human engagement. So we're pushing our resources as a leadership team towards those most essential and valuable uses of our time. So just going back through that in the same order, going back to the student experience. So one of the things that I led at MNPS was our career and technical education work. And one of the problems that we were seeing is that high schools were wanting to sunset pathways in STEM and technology because of a lack of interest from our students in that work. And what that told us was like, oh my gosh, we are missing the boat on what it looks like to engage our students who we all think of and talk of as being digital natives in what computer science is and why these STEM technologies are exciting, they're growing, and are going to be essential to our students in their futures. So I was told before I got up here to be as specific as possible and everything. So we actually ran a pilot with a group called Code for Kids. They are in the room today, where one of the things that we were learning was that students needed to start getting computer science exposure before they got to high school and were picking these kinds of pathways. And that exposure had to be something that was challenging and rigorous, but could still be delivered in the kinds of classrooms we often have in public schools where computer science is being taught, which, to be frank, is often like a dual certified band teacher cramming this in, and they're like fourth prep of the day. So we ran this pilot with Code for Kids because what they do is build these structured independent modules where kids are really doing, engaged, like basically high quality curriculum and materials, but for computer science that are being facilitated then by a teacher who doesn't have to be a content expert in science, in computer science. So that was like one of the first things that we started piloting, again, to test this hypothesis that if we're planning backwards from wanting our students to be able and interested and ready to connect in growing STEM fields, they have to be exposed and start learning way before they get to high school in a way that makes sense and is relevant to them when they get to their high schools. I've been talking for too long, so I'll skip over some of the stuff we were doing with teachers and then talk a little bit about that third bucket for us as we were thinking about how do we organize ourselves as a department around prioritizing human time for human-centric activities and moving back house and non-human essential functions into the AI space. And one of the coolest places that we started working on that was the idea of counseling. So I mentioned the strategy team at MNPS oversees our college and career strategy. One of those things is how we think about the advising and counseling space. And one of the things that we just keep seeing in the world of counseling and advising is counselors are spending way too much time doing paperwork components like auditing transcripts and building schedules manually and those kinds of activities that absolutely can and should be done by AI. So that not so that we can replace counselors or have less of them, but so we're freeing up that capacity for the work that only humans can do, which is connecting with kids about their interests, about their passions, advising and coaching them, building those relationships, and guiding them on trajectories that they're then using AI to help build those specifics in, like what classes you need to take in what years. So that is some of the work that we've been doing for thinking about, again, the overarching theme in all of that is starting with the end in mind. What needs to be true for kids? What skills and abilities do they need to be able to graduate with? What are the things that happen along that K-12 trajectory to get them there? And then what are the things that we as leaders need to be doing to organize our time so that we are focused on the most important activities so that kids are learning and moving along that trajectory?
Great, thank you for those specific examples. And side note, you mentioned computer science, and I see some of my partners at the Department of Education, the computer science standards are going to be up on first reading with some important revisions incorporating AI literacy and competencies at our board meeting next week, so you can check those out.
That's great timing.
Daren, let's move to you and talk a little bit about what's happening at Valor. As many of us know who follow the work at Valor closely, you all are known at this point for really innovative solutions to tricky problems. And I think when it comes to AI, I'm really interested to know how you're thinking about these decisions where you've intentionally said yes as you think about the AI space and where you've said no, not yet, and particularly with an eye towards using AI in a way that's safe and good for student learning.
Yeah, so it's a great question and something we've been grappling deeply with, as I know everyone else is too. think it was affirming to see several of the speakers earlier kind of speak to going back to your mission and your vision and kind of figuring out who are you and what do you want to do, and then how might AI kind of enable or be a barrier to those things. And so I think for our conversation has been largely around two values that we have been grappling with. The first is we are a relationship-based approach, and so we deeply value human connection and relationships. And the way that's translated like very concretely into our policy is like there's no conversational AI in the classroom. Like we just don't want kids on any of our devices having access to conversational AI just because the attachment hacking risks. I just think we're very early in understanding how what the relational impact is. And so we're kind of holding that line to begin with based on our value. The second is the one that I haven't heard talked about as much, but this is kind of my own personal experience then working with our AI Community Council and with our leaders, is that I think one of the greatest risks of the AI arrival is the impact on trust. So within the relational field, knowing like, who did this come from? Did you write this? Is this real? Is this an authentic exchange that I'm having? Can definitely impact trust. Kids aren't trusting teachers as much, teachers aren't trusting kids as much, and we're deeply worried about that. And so we realized that's a very hard thing to policy, and so we ended up developing a set of AI norms, and I think we all need to be figuring out what are the uses and what are the norms around use. And so we put into our norms a transparency and disclosure norm, just to make it the norm, because we're very worried about it going underground and trying to keep it above ground, that if you're using it in these contexts, it's okay, and we want to know about it. Even if you're using it and you weren't supposed to be using it, let's try and see if we can talk about it, because the disclosure and the transparency is really important.
Great, thank you. I appreciate you sharing those insights. And we're going to move to Blake now from Hamilton County. And I'm interested in your thoughts, Blake. We, as we heard from Amanda earlier, see implementation across the spectrum at this point in terms of where districts are in leading in the AI space. It's a tricky place, I think Emily said, to be a leader right now. But we have seen Hamilton County really be at the forefront of that movement to be strategic and thoughtful and bring along your district educators. So can you talk to us a little bit about what that looks like in terms of the last 3 years, the discussions that you've led in Hamilton County? What do you think, based on that work, teachers and leaders need in this moment? An extra bonus if you have time, what do you think districts need?
It's interesting, like whenever I hear a term like Hamilton County is leading, I said last night, I was like, it made me pause for a second, because I'm like, we think we have an approach. I would call it two phases. Like at first, we wanted to allow for some individual experimentation. And so understanding that our foundation in Hamilton County, when it comes to teaching and learning, is built upon high quality instructional materials. And you have pockets of individuals that were experimenting with a wide variety of AI platforms. Also acknowledging that in education, if you're a vendor in the room, I'm sorry, not sorry for the next comment, but like we didn't want to fall into vendor hype, right? Like it's a real, I was sitting with Sara earlier, and the comment around the 10 emails a day. Yeah. Yes. You all also always know when we're in budget season, because they increase at that point. And so try to determine we're never gonna be able to catch up with where technology is. And so shifting really to thinking about what are the skills and the aptitudes and the mindsets, not only for our students, but for our teachers, that are going to be able to utilize AI for the long run. And so we started with individual experimentation, and then collaborative conversations began to happen. And then now I would call it more of a formalized approach in how we are approaching AI. And so we partner alongside with some of our partners at Public Education Forward in Chattanooga, Benwood Foundation, Chattanooga 2.0, and then what's happening in our schools, to start to say, how can we bring practitioners that are in the classrooms, in schools right now, bring them together, ask, what is it that you're working on? how are you using AI, and then how might we be able to expand that? And so this summer we brought together and kicked off 6 different working groups. Some are focused on teacher practice, some are focused on student practice, some are just innovation in general. We also have some groups that are thinking about governance. They're thinking about operational efficiencies. They're thinking about how do administrators and central office work with each other to be able to utilize AI. So we kicked them off, and then now they're out having conversations, digging in, bringing more people around the table to see what is the practice that's happening right now, so that we might then continue to expand. And it's funny, like I was sitting at the table and texting actually with one of my leaders of a working group who's over teacher practices, and he texted me and he said, we actually had to spend quite a bit of time our last meeting, even around the table, arguing about should we or shouldn't we? Should we use AI? Should we not use AI? And so try to take that balanced approach while at the same time, keeping what we think is important in teaching and learning, which is high quality instructional materials, best practice in instruction, and then seeing how we might be able to utilize AI to be able to provide differentiation and expansion for students. The last thing I would say is it's important for us to also include members of the business community. And so in education, sometimes we can be guilty of creating a silo and saying, we know all things and we're going to educate children, and then when they leave us, then you should hire them. And that's a backwards approach. We need to hear from our future employers in Chattanooga and surrounding country. What are some of the aptitudes that you need from our students as they are moving? And then how are you currently utilizing AI in your practices and bringing them around the table so that they can inform our work, so that our students as they graduate are more prepared?
Awesome. Thanks, Blake. All right, Amanda, I'm going to turn to you, and I'm excited to hear your voice on this panel because you have become such a state expert resource to all of us in this space when it comes to AI, and so I appreciate all the work you've done to support our state board members, our staff, and just to become such a trusted partner in this work. So I'm excited to hear from you as you think back over the last few years. You've had lots of conversations with state leaders, district leaders, national leaders about AI in education and where the puck is headed. I'm curious, what patterns do you see emerging, and what do you think is top of mind for Tennessee educators? What does that look like in terms of the state level supports that are needed in this moment?
Yeah, thank you for the question. And I remember us even talking about AI in education a year or 2 years ago, and how to even approach the conversation. And there's been so many learnings since then. I feel like we're learning about the use of AI and maturing in our understanding all the time, and hopefully we continue to do so. I think there's 3 main things that I want to highlight. I think the main thing is that the conversation has been moving from should we use AI, what is AI, to how do we use it well, how do we use it safely, responsibly, ethically. I think I might have missed a couple of acronyms from the C framework, but very aligned. How to use it thoughtfully and responsibly. How do we make sure that it's good for students, and how do we make sure that we are not just adding another technology onto probably an already dense tech stack at the local level, but that we're choosing something that addresses some kind of a challenge. And so the first thing I want to highlight is the use cases in AI that I've learned about that really open my eyes into what's possible, and again, thinking beyond ChatGPT, as we saw with Course Mojo and the other high quality instances that we're learning about. This is not putting an LLM or a chatbot in front of a student. It's so much more than that. And but the use cases that get me excited bring me back to whenever I was a teacher, and I actually started teaching here in Nashville many years ago. And I think about the challenges that I faced as a teacher, and that I'm seeing AI open these doors that might not have been accessible before. So 2 quick examples that I want to share. One being, actually, when I saw Course Mojo in action one time, we saw a lot of the capabilities earlier from Daisha, but something that struck me as just so exciting and door opening was that as students are working through their high quality instruction materials and answering questions or writing their responses, the feedback is coming back to the teacher, And of course, there's already ed tech that might show data points or multiple choice, et cetera, but the AI is synthesizing how, what the class is understanding, the misconceptions, the gaps in understanding, and the teacher can in real time address the gaps in understanding, whereas before as a teacher, that might have been at the earliest the next day, maybe the week after, that I would have been able to address actually gaps in understanding from an exit ticket that students would have turned into me. Another is when it comes to improving instructional practice, from classroom management to the questions that teachers are asking. There's classroom observations, and I don't mean in terms of accountability, I mean in terms of improving your instructional practice. Today, you can record a lesson and watch it back later, but AI can actually provide feedback that is aligned with research-backed evidence for quality instruction, maybe alignment to some kind of a rubric that your grade level team uses, and so to provide feedback in that way. The second thing I want to elevate is that in terms of good use of AI, the topic of instructional coherence is really kind of elevated. And I think a thread that we have seen today and is taking root in a lot of conversations of how do we make sure that the AI that is being used is aligned with the existing instructional vision and priorities of that school or of that district. And so that means using your high quality instruction materials and making sure that you're relying on the expertise of your teachers. And then the third thing I'll mention is that the career readiness component of AI is integral to so many of these conversations. In Tennessee, there was a stat that said over half of the job listings that are listing AI or machine learning skills are not in the STEM or tech sector. They are in other fields, healthcare, education, business, et cetera. And so that highlights an importance for AI skill sets to be taught not only in a computer science course, but how do we make sure that teachers are set up to support AI literacy and skill sets, an understanding of when to use and when not to use, and how to work as a collaborative partner throughout content areas, and just the importance of the durable skill sets. But CTE teachers, career and technical education teachers in Tennessee, the recent Tennessee Educator survey showed that they recognize that AI is changing the skill sets their students need to learn, but only half or so of the CTE teachers responded that they feel equipped to teach those skills. So I think the guidance, the connection between education and the workforce skills, not just the technical, but also the durable skills, and making sure that that's connected with K-12, so that way CTE teachers, core content teachers know how to address AI throughout.
Yes, underscore. Thank you for that as well. We're going to try to squeeze in one last question each. I'm going to combine Blake and Sara with my next one. We've talked a lot about the potential for AI to really enhance teaching and learning, to be centered on human well-being. I mean, I think there have been countless examples this morning of where it can be really purposefully and effectively used. I want to spend a minute talking about some concerns. I mean, we are, as I mentioned, and we all know, at a moment where technology in the classroom is being questioned and re-examined. Research is showing us that we need to be mindful of those, the screen time in particular, and over-reliance potentially on AI. Is possible if we're not careful. So I'm curious for Blake and Sara, at the district level in particular, what concerns about AI do you think are valid, and what concerns do you think might be overstated? And even just one each would be great, but Blake, I'm looking at you. You want to start?
Sure. Yeah, I think a concern about AI is, and it was mentioned earlier, is poor practice. It's substituting poor practice, or thinking that it's a replacement for what high quality instruction is. And we've had to tackle the screen issue as well in Hamilton County Schools. And I think we've come up with a balanced approach. And our guiding question has been around, how does the use of technology enhance the learning that's happening in the classroom? It should not be a substitute. It should not be supplanting what's happening, but how do you take just great instructional practices based on foundational skills and then utilize it to enhance what's happening? And so I think that the concern is if individuals started to use technology to substitute best practice, and it's just really poor practice. And I think your question is around what should we not be concerned about? We talked about earlier is just the confusion between screen time versus AI, and so that trying to help parents understand that like there is a difference and it can be used responsibly in the classroom. And the last thing I'll say is in Hamilton County, we value a balance between academic press and personalization. And I'm very cautious to make sure that we're still having students that are engaging with each other, engaging with their teacher, and having that human connection, because at the end of the day, things like empathy, sympathy, the ability to be able to just communicate and have cultural awareness is so key to the success of our students.
Yes. I don't know that I think any of the risks are overblown. So I mean, the first thing around safety, and it was just funny because I started by saying I was an optimist. The first thing around just like, how do we think about safety? I think one of the concerns that I have is right now for most district and school decision makers, if you're asking the question, how do we know if this AI is safe? Is it secure? Does it protect our students' data? The person we're asking is the vendor, and the vendor is like 100% it's safe. We're like, okay, well that checks that box. And I worry about what the solution to that problem is. I think in a lot of districts, the solution is increasingly to centralize risk management by then saying, everything has to flow through an IT department with some sort of rigorous vetting process. And I do worry that that's just not realistic with what the pace of change and adoption is in schools, especially when you're talking about, a district as big as MNPS with 80,000 students, 160 schools, that we have not found a middle ground between just taking the vendor at their word that something is safe without any sort of external validation process, and then really hoping or on the other extreme, really hoping that we can somehow centralize that kind of vetting process, which I just don't think is realistic. I've been wanting an ed reports for AI, and then I saw Emily Freitag speak, and I'm like, oh, we're gonna get there, great. So I just need to wait, it sounds like. So yeah, no pressure, Emily. I just hope that can be done right away. And then the other thing is I know we've been saying that you can separate this question of screen time from AI, and then I do just worry, how does that actually play out at the level of the classroom? I think right now the technology is not there yet to be able to say that we're meaningfully separating those things. And I do think that, we ended up in this one-to-one device world really as an accident of COVID. It wasn't really something that we as district leaders sat down and strategically decided, we are all transitioning now into a one-to-one device world. It was a necessity of remote learning during the pandemic. And I do feel like we are now catching up with some of the degrees of the problems that we have created by that. And I'm not really sure that we've meaningfully differentiated between the idea of taking on AI and the screen time thing yet in the way that this technology is being used and deployed in schools. I think most teachers implement technology the way they use it and experience it in their own lives. And right now, how are people using these technologies? They're using generative AI on their phones in isolation or on their computers in isolation. And we know we need to be in a place where these are separate conversations, but the technology and adoption is just not there yet. And I do worry about what is happening in that classroom experience in the meantime. My mom is a very recently retired pediatrician, and something that she was seeing in the last years of her practice is just unprecedented challenges that the kids she saw in a pediatric care context due to overuse of screen time. Kids who had underdeveloped core muscles from way too much time engaging with screens, or very severe and early onset ocular disabilities that she had never seen in the years before, in the 40 years she was in practice. So I think we need to take this stuff really seriously, and I don't think that the technology is there to hand wave this away as we're gonna make it separate eventually and it's fine in the meantime. It's just not there yet.
Thank you both for those thoughts. Definitely some real risks and concerns to keep at the forefront as we're thinking about where this work heads. I want to turn to Daren for one more question. At Valor, you all are always so intentional about bringing in student voice and centering your work in the student experience, and I know that's been true of your work in AI. So I'm curious, in your work and conversations with students, what's one thing that you've learned from students about how you're thinking about AI at Valor that you think we should all know?
Yeah, so I've done a lot of work with our youth in the last year, both on the AI Youth Council, and then we just do a lot of student-centered design. To begin with, we're also working on kind of an innovative new school model for our high school and have youth co-designers on it, and we have been thinking about different ways to integrate AI in that model, and so it's been very helpful to get their input. I would say, first and foremost, and this goes for both our students and our faculty, the tech backlash is very real. The kids when we say, what about integrating AI into this? They're like, thumbs down, no thanks, we don't. So I have felt a shift in just like the public opinion, and it's a very nuanced thing, and I think once you have a deeper conversation with them, they also are more open, but you're just being aware that kind of the vibe is changing is what I would say, both with adults and students. I think students are, I mean, I had a conversation with some high schoolers yesterday. They weren't Valor students, but we were on a school visit, and I was just asking them about AI. And the student said they just readily admit that they use it to cheat, essentially. And then they also readily recognize that that's not a good practice, and they don't want to do that. That they're not going to be learning that way. And so they're basically asking for some support and responsibility and help and kind of like navigating that difficult situation, because what I said to them was like, it is so tempting when I have to write something to just like have AI write it for me. I'm sure it's tempting for you, because I think the kind of design pressure I felt was like, how can I design school that's not so pressure intense on them that they feel compelled that they need to reach to it, to do it, to make it easier. So I think those are several things I'm hearing.
Great. Yes, thank you. And thank you for setting that example of really bringing student voice to these conversations, because they are the early adopters. They are the ones that are really going to help us lead the way in terms of what they need for support and guidance as we move into this world more fully. Amanda, my last question is for you before we do a quick lightning round. But again, thinking back to all the conversations you've had over the last few years with state leaders, national leaders, thinking about the principles that should really undergird our approach in Tennessee at the state level, at the district level, what's one guiding principle that you think we really should be centering on as we think about the state level approach? And is there a guardrail that you would point to that you think might unintentionally hold us back?
So I think that a really important guiding principle for us to keep in mind as we consider when to use AI and how to use AI is that the role of the teacher is still incredibly central. Highly effective teachers, the relationships that they're building with their students, the expertise and context that they bring to the classroom is still central. Research has shown that the teacher is the most important in-school factor for student success. And I think that AI should help to extend the reach of effective teachers. And the instructional strategies that we know work, the ones that are research-backed, should still be a part of instruction in the classroom, not just because AI is here, do we need to change everything, but again, kind of bringing us back to evaluating what the original instructional priorities that a school or district has and how AI fits into that. And this also reinforces the importance, not that they weren't already important, but the even growing importance of building durable skills amongst students, the collaboration, the relationship building, the problem solving, communication, all of these skill sets that employers are seeing incredibly important for students to have as they exit K-12 are also becoming even more important and valued with the rise of AI, because to use AI effectively, you have to have proficiency in these human skills. So making sure that we are still relying on that expertise of our teachers and equipping them with the skill sets in order to model AI effectively within their instruction. The guardrail that I would say could unintentionally or otherwise hold us back is this idea of lumping in AI or technology as being all of the same. And potentially prohibiting technology in the classroom, whether it be on the student or the teacher side, or kind of what Babax was saying earlier about putting your head in the sand and not addressing it. I think there's so many different use cases of AI. Of course, I think a lot of the conversation is dominated by the student-facing AI, but like I mentioned earlier, there's teacher supports for improving instruction. There's operational use cases of AI that's helping with efficiencies in systems, and again, like helping students feel prepared for their careers. So I think that the policies should be strong enough to prevent harm, but precise enough so that way we're not preventing exploration of what could be opening the doors that have been closed before. I think Bree said earlier that policies should be clear but flexible, and I think that that's definitely true. So what guidance can be available to help make sure that AI is vetted, that it is producing student outcomes, that there's procurement guidance, that there's human evaluation, and that we're evaluating the impacts, I think would all be very helpful places for us to focus policies and supports around. But again, understanding that there's many different kinds of AI and tools using AI in education, and that there's also many different types of use cases that can really do wonderful things if we go about it with the right supports in place.
Awesome. Okay, at the risk of going over, we're going to go lightning fast. Last question. This work is moving quickly. We know this is August 2026, August 2028. If we were to walk into a Tennessee classroom that you're leading, or a district office, or a staff meeting, and AI was being used in a way that made you feel proud and like this is what it should look like, what would that look like? Just give us a quick window. Amanda, I'll start with you and we'll work right.
I think this comes back to AI literacy and the education of understanding how and when to use it. But if I walked into a school or a staff meeting, is that AI is kind of like operating in the background. It's not something that is like front and center in the classroom, and it's not something that is drawing everyone's attention away from the discourse and the teaching and learning and the questioning. But is something that is analyzing data, providing feedback, individualized support, and operating in a way that we know it's there and we are educated on how to use it. We know that it's bounds, we know what it can do and what it can't do. And so everyone's educated through AI literacy, and that it's operating in a way that is providing support but is not the central focus.
Love that.
It's a classroom that has a balance of best practices and instruction with human connection, but at the same time offering AI to be able to provide individualized student support, opportunities to accelerate students who need gap closure, as well as elevate students who need expansion. And it's done in a responsible way that benefits students.
I feel like my brother helped start Summit, which is like a personalized learning school many years ago, and I feel like tech couldn't quite make good on that promise then, but I can imagine a world where we're at a tipping point where we can get to a truly, like, that Valor is much more truly a comprehensively competency-based, personalized core that's still built around relationships, but that we can truly map kind of our work in a much more personalized way to meet the needs of each kid instead of our current situation where we're kind of having to go to the middle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think very similar to Amanda, I would say in the K-5 space, I would want the AI to be basically undetectable. What you would walk in is you would see a classroom using high quality curriculum and materials, kids working in groups with each other, collaborating, reading, writing, driving inquiry, and then you'd be like, oh my gosh, that was an incredible lesson. And when you talk to the teacher later, you would have learned that the way the lesson was paced, the student groups were set, the rigor of the text and the prompting questions the kids were engaging with, all of that was supported and facilitated by AI, but was invisible in the classroom, would be my ideal state in those early grades. In later grades, I'd want to see kids who have had, building on that experience, structured computer science training and exposure so that they're actually ready to be engaging with some of these conversations about how are they going to take these skill sets into the workforce with them. And I think that's then more building on some of the work that Daren said, which is like you imagine these like new high school models where kids are using AI to engage much more flexibly with even the spaces that they are in and engaging in during the day. I want to see a lot more innovation and disruption in those later spaces, and then I want that disruption to almost be invisible in the K-5 space. Sort of how I'm organizing my thoughts around this.
I love it. Thank you all so much for leaving us with that really optimistic and beautiful picture of what's possible. And I hope in 2 years we'll be back in this room and talking about all the things that have happened between now and then to get us there. So join me in thanking this amazing panel for their insights.